Welcome to Fairy Tales Dashed 1.
Hello, little adventurers and skygazers. Are you ready for a story that will make you look up at the sky with brand new eyes? The tale I have for you today is called Flicker and the Whispering Winds. Once upon a time, nestled in a valley, so green it shimmered like an emerald, lived a boy named Flicker. Flicker wasn't like the other children in his village. While they chased butterflies in the meadows or built forts in the whispering woods, Flicker's gaze was always drawn upwards to the vast, ever-changing canvas of the sky. He loved the clouds. He loved their fluffy billowy forms, their pearly whites, and sometimes stormy grays. But most of all, he loved to imagine what they could be. Flicker lived with his grandmother, a woman with eyes as kind as the sunrise and hands that smelled of lavender and sun-baked earth. She understood Flicker's quiet nature, his fascination with the intangible. She would often find him sitting on the highest hill, a worn blanket around his shoulders, a contented sigh escaping his lips as he watched the clouds drift by. One blustery afternoon, a particularly magnificent cloud, shaped like a proud lion with a flowing mane, caught Flicker's attention. He watched as it lumbered across the blue, its form regal and strong. Flicker, feeling a playful urge, cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Roar, mighty lion, show us your strength." To his utter astonishment, the cloud seemed to ripple. The lion's mane swirled, and for a fleeting moment, it resembled a playful puppy chasing its tail. Flicker gasped, his heart thrumming with a mixture of disbelief and pure delight. He tried again, his voice a little shaky. "Now be a graceful swan," he whispered, imagining the elegant curve of a swan's neck. And lo and behold, the cloud stretched and elongated its form, softening into the graceful silhouette of a swan gliding on an invisible lake. From that day on, Flicker's world transformed. He discovered he had a unique gift, a silent language he shared with the wind and the clouds. He could whisper thoughts, wishes, and stories to the sky, and the clouds in their vast, airy way would listen and respond. He called it cloud shaping, though he never spoke of it to anyone, afraid they wouldn't understand. His days became a symphony of whispers and transformations. He'd tell the clouds about the mischievous squirrels he saw, and they'd twist into comical little nut-gathering shapes. He'd share his quiet dreams of flying, and they'd morph into soaring birds or billowing sails. He'd whisper about the flowers in his grandmother's garden, and they'd bloom into soft petal-like shapes. The villagers noticed a change in the sky above their valley. It was no longer just a backdrop. It was a dynamic, playful entity. They'd point and exclaim, "Look at that cloud, it looks just like a giant's teapot," or "Did you see that?" It was a whole fleet of ships sailing across the blue. They attributed it to the valley's magical air, or perhaps a shift in the winds. Only Flicker knew the secret. One scorching summer, a terrible drought fell upon the land. The river that fed their valley dwindled to a trickle, the crops turned brittle and brown, and the laughter of children was replaced by the weary sighs of adults. The village elder, a man named Barnaby, a kind soul with a weathered face, called a village meeting. "We must pray for rain," he declared, his voice heavy with worry. "Our stores are low, and our spirits are even lower." Flicker listened, his heart aching for his village. He knew the clouds. He knew they held water, but they seemed reluctant to part with it. They were as dry and thirsty as the land below. He felt a responsibility, a heavy weight settling on his young shoulders. That night, as the moon cast a silvery glow, Flicker crept out of his small cottage. He climbed his favorite hill, the one where he'd first discovered his gift. The sky was a vast, star-dusted expanse, but the clouds were sparse and thin like tattered rags. He sat down, his knees drawn to his chest, and began to speak to the sky, his voice barely a murmur against the rustling of the dry grass. "Dear clouds," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly, "the land is thirsty. The flowers are wilting. The animals are weak. My village needs you." He paused, gathering his courage. He didn't just want rain. He wanted to inspire the clouds, to remind them of their purpose, of the life-giving water they carried within. He thought of the joyful splash of raindrops on leaves, the smell of damp earth after a shower, the vibrant green that returned to the valley. "Imagine," he said, his voice gaining a little strength. "Imagine you are great overflowing wells. Imagine you are gentle rivers flowing with cool, clear water. Imagine you are the source of all life." He pictured it in his mind, pouring all his longing into the image. He then conjured the shape of a mighty elephant, its trunk held high, ready to spray water. Be like the elephant, generous and strong, he urged. He imagined the elephant's trunk becoming a waterfall, a cascade of life. He then thought of playful dolphins leaping through the ocean. Be like the dolphins dancing with joy, he whispered, picturing them showering the world with their playfulness. He continued for what felt like hours, weaving stories of gentle nourishment of thirsty roots, drinking deeply of parched throats being quenched. He shapeshifted the clouds into benevolent figures. Ancient trees, offering shade, nurturing mothers, cradling their babes, even the soft, comforting blanket of his grandmother. He poured all his empathy, all his understanding of need and relief into his whispered conversations. As the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky, Flicker felt a shift. The thin clouds began to thicken to gather. They weren't just amorphous masses anymore. They seemed to be coalescing, responding to his silent plea. He saw a faint, silvery glow emanating from their depths. He continued his gentle, coaxing his voice, now a steady, hopeful hum. He imagined the clouds as his friends, his confidants, sharing his deep desire to help. He pictured them swelling, growing heavy, not with sadness, but with the promise of life. And then it happened. A single fat drop of rain landed on Flicker's cheek, then another, and another. Soon, a soft, steady drizzle began to fall. Flicker looked up, tears of joy mingling with the raindrops. The sky was no longer a passive observer, it was a participant, a gentle giver. The drizzle turned into a steady shower, then a comforting, life-affirming rain. It washed over the parched earth, soaking deep into the thirsty roots. The air filled with the sweet, earthy scent of renewal. Flicker watched his heart overflowing as the valley began to awaken. He returned home as the sun began to peek through the clearing, clouds his clothes, damp his face streaked with rain, and a radiant smile. His grandmother, who had been watching from her window, met him at the door. She didn't ask where he had been. She simply embraced him, her eyes full of understanding and a touch of wonder. The rain continued for days. The river swelled, the crops revived, and the valley turned a vibrant, hopeful green once more. The villagers rejoiced. They offered thanks to the heavens, their prayers answered. They spoke of a miracle, of a blessing from the sky. Flicker, however, knew it was more than just a blessing. He knew it was a conversation, a shared moment of empathy between a small boy and the vast breathing sky. He continued his secret conversations, his cloud shaping a constant, joyful expression of his connection to the world around him. He taught the clouds to sing with the wind, to dance with the sunlight, and to weep with empathy. He learned that even the biggest, most distant things could be touched by a gentle heart and a whispered wish. He became known not as the boy who tamed the clouds, but as the boy who understood them, the boy who shared their silent language, and in doing so brought life and wonder to his valley. And with that, our adventure ends. If this story sparked your imagination, a like would be wonderful, and it helps us share more magical tales. Subscribing ensures you'll never miss our next adventure, and it's the best way to join our community of little dreamers. Until next time, keep your eyes on the sky and your hearts open to wonder.
See you again, and do like, share, and subscribe the channel. Fairy Tales.